Welcome to Screen Hollywood, the home of movie news and entertainment. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Prepare yourself, because Evil Dead Burn doesn't simply raise the violence, it launches it into another dimension. And I guarantee there are going to be moments where audiences instinctively look away from the screen. That's how effective some of these sequences are. Everything serves the story. Everything serves the horror. The violence becomes the rhythm of the movie. This is horror with absolutely no interest in compromising. It's aggressive, it's vicious, it's unapologetic. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Screen Hollywood. If you're an Evil Dead fan, you've probably been waiting for this movie with a mixture of excitement and a little bit of apprehension. Because let's be honest, whenever Hollywood touches a legendary horror franchise, you never quite know what you're going to get. Sometimes they completely understand what made the original special, and sometimes they completely miss the point. Thankfully, Evil Dead Burn falls firmly into the first category. This is absolutely a worthy entry into the Evil Dead franchise. It's brutal, it's uncompromising, it's technically outstanding, and I can honestly say horror fans are going to have an absolute blast watching this movie. But I also think there's one major creative decision that stopped it from becoming one of the very best films in the entire series. We'll get to that shortly. First, let's talk about what this movie gets spectacularly right. This film doesn't hold back. If you thought Evil Dead Rise was intense, prepare yourself. Because Evil Dead Burn doesn't simply raise the violence, it launches it into another dimension. I've watched horror movies for years. Nothing really shocks me anymore. I've seen every Evil Dead film. I've seen Terrifier. I've seen Saw. I've seen Hostel. I've seen practically everything the horror genre has thrown at audiences over the last 20 years. And even I found myself physically wincing during certain scenes. Not because they were badly made, quite the opposite, because the practical effects are so unbelievably convincing. The special effects team deserves enormous praise. The gore isn't cartoonish, it's visceral, it's ugly, it's painful. You genuinely feel every injury, every impact, every horrifying transformation. It's relentless, and I guarantee there are going to be moments where audiences instinctively look away from the screen. That's how effective some of these sequences are. The performances hold everything together. One thing I don't think gets talked about enough in horror movies is acting. People often assume horror is all about monsters, special effects, and jump scares. But none of that works unless the audience actually believes the people caught in the nightmare. Thankfully, the performances across the board are incredibly strong. This story centers around a grieving family whose already fractured relationships are pushed to breaking point when Deadite forces begin tearing everything apart. The emotional family dynamic gives the horror a stronger foundation than simply throwing strangers into danger. The actors completely commit to the material. You believe the fear, you believe the desperation, you believe the emotional trauma. And because the performances feel authentic, the horror becomes even more disturbing. That's exactly what great horror should do. This feels like a new era. Another thing I really appreciated is that this movie isn't simply trying to remake Sam Raimi's original films. It respects them, but it also wants to evolve. And I think that's incredibly important. Franchises only survive if they're prepared to grow. What I found really interesting was the way Evil Dead Burn continues expanding the mythology surrounding the Deadites. Without giving anything away, it's very clear the filmmakers are introducing fresh ideas, new concepts, and different rules surrounding these demonic entities. It feels like they're laying foundations, not just making another sequel. They're building a much larger Evil Dead universe. That's exciting, because after more than 40 years, this franchise still has somewhere new to go. One thing I absolutely loved was the cinematography. This movie looks fantastic. Director Sebastian Vanacek brings a confident visual style to the franchise, combining kinetic camera movement with inventive compositions that constantly keep viewers feeling uneasy. His background in atmospheric horror is evident throughout the film. There are some genuinely stunning camera movements, some beautifully choreographed sequences, and moments where the camera itself almost feels possessed. It's stylish without ever becoming distracting. everything serves the story. Everything serves the horror. And visually, this might actually be one of the strongest looking films in the franchise. Without revealing spoilers, the central story works really well. The pacing keeps moving, the characters make believable decisions, the family dynamics create emotional investment. And once everything begins falling apart, the film rarely gives you an opportunity to breathe. It's intense from beginning to end. The narrative constantly pushes forward, and despite all the chaos, I never found myself checking my watch. That's always a good sign. Because while I genuinely enjoyed Evil Dead Burn, and I absolutely recommend seeing it, I don't think this is the strongest modern Evil Dead film. For me, that honor still belongs to Evil Dead 2013. I know, some people absolutely hated that movie, but personally, I thought Fede Alvarez understood something incredibly important. He understood that horror isn't just about blood, it's about anticipation, it's about atmosphere, it's about making the audience dread what's hiding around the next corner. That's where Evil Dead Burn started to lose me. Not because it wasn't violent enough, quite the opposite, because I actually think it became too obsessed with violence. Now don't get me wrong, I completely understand what the filmmakers were trying to achieve. This is Evil Dead. It's always been a franchise that pushes boundaries. Blood, violence, body horror, possession, grotesque practical effects. It's part of the franchise's DNA. Nobody goes into an Evil Dead movie expecting a quiet psychological drama. That's not what this series has ever been about. But there's a difference between being horrifying and simply being relentless. And I think Evil Dead Burn occasionally crosses that line. One of the things I kept thinking throughout the movie was, slow down. Not because I was bored, far from it. I actually wanted the film to pause for a moment, to let the atmosphere breathe, to allow the audience's imagination to take over. Some of the greatest horror films ever made understand one simple truth. The imagination is often far more terrifying than anything a director can put on screen. Think about The Exorcist, Alien, The Shining, even Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead 2. Those films weren't frightening because something horrific was happening every 30 seconds. They terrified audiences because they created anticipation. They built tension. They made you afraid of what might happen next. That feeling, that dreadful anticipation, is what stays with you long after the credits roll. With Evil Dead Burn, I sometimes felt the production team became so determined to shock the audience that they forgot how powerful restraint can be. The violence is extraordinary. The practical effects are phenomenal. Some of the gore sequences are among the best I've ever seen. But after a while, something interesting happened. I stopped feeling anxious. Not because the scenes weren't impressive, but because the film rarely gave me time to recover before launching into the next assault. Eventually, the violence becomes the rhythm of the movie, and when that happens, some of the suspense inevitably disappears. This is where I think Evil Dead 2013 still has the edge. I know that's probably going to divide opinion. A lot of fans dismissed that film when it was released. Personally, I've always thought it was outstanding. Why? Because it understood pacing. It knew when to attack the audience, but it also knew when to step back. It allowed dread to build naturally. It made you nervous before anything actually happened. That's brilliant horror filmmaking. Even Evil Dead Rise, which I thoroughly enjoyed, balanced its brutality with moments of suspense and uncertainty. It allowed the audience to absorb what was unfolding before throwing them back into the nightmare. For me, Burn never quite finds that balance. It's almost permanently operating at maximum intensity. And ironically, that slightly reduces the impact. Because when everything is extreme, nothing feels truly unexpected. Now, let's be absolutely clear. If you're a die-hard horror fan, you're probably going to love this movie. In fact, you'll probably come out of the cinema wondering how they managed to get away with some of what you've just seen. This is not mainstream horror. This isn't designed for casual audiences looking for a few spooky moments before heading home. This is horror with absolutely no interest in compromising. It's aggressive, it's vicious, it's unapologetic, and I actually respect that. I respect filmmakers who commit completely to their vision, even if I don't agree with every creative decision they make. But if you're somebody who's only just getting into horror, or you're expecting something closer to a supernatural thriller, be warned. There are scenes in this film that are genuinely difficult to watch. And I'm saying that as someone who's watched horror movies for decades. If I found myself wincing, I can only imagine how some audiences are going to react. One thing this movie leaves me feeling incredibly optimistic about is the future of this franchise. Because it's obvious the creative team aren't interested in repeating themselves. They're expanding the mythology. They're introducing new ideas. They're exploring different interpretations of what the Deadites are capable of. And I think that's exactly the right direction. The worst thing any long-running franchise can do is become creatively stagnant. The best ones evolve. They respect their history without becoming trapped by it. Evil Dead Burn feels like another important step in that evolution. It proves there's still plenty of life left in this universe. And as someone who's been following Evil Dead for years, that's exciting. Also, before I forget, when you see this movie, hang around for the mid-credits and post-credits scene. There's a tie-in there. I won't say any more. So, where does Evil Dead Burn rank for me? I think it's a very good horror movie. I think it's a worthy addition to one of horror's greatest franchises. The performances are excellent. The cinematography is outstanding. The practical effects are genuinely world-class. The story keeps you invested, and I really admire the filmmakers for having the confidence to expand the mythology rather than simply recreating the past. But I also think this film falls just short of greatness. Not because it's too violent. There's no such thing as too violent for an Evil Dead movie if the violence serves the fear. My issue is that the film occasionally mistakes relentless brutality for genuine suspense. Horror isn't simply about showing audiences the most disturbing thing imaginable. Sometimes, the scariest thing in the room is the thing you never quite see. The sound behind the door, the movement at the end of a corridor, the silence before the attack. That's where true horror lives. And I think Evil Dead Burn could have become an all-time classic if it had trusted that idea just a little more. For me, Evil Dead Burn is a fantastic night at the cinema. It's brutal, it's beautifully made, it's packed with unforgettable practical effects, and it proves once again that the Evil Dead franchise remains one of the most fearless horror series ever created. Would I recommend it? Absolutely, especially if you're an Evil Dead fan. Just don't expect a slow-burning ghost story. Expect an all-out assault on your senses. For me, I give Evil Dead Burn a very strong 8.5 out of 10. An outstanding horror film, just not quite the masterpiece it could have been. But those are my thoughts. Now I want to hear yours. Have you seen Evil Dead Burn yet? Where does it rank in your Evil Dead list? Do you think it's the best film in the franchise? Or do you still prefer the Evil Dead 1981, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 2013, or Evil Dead Rise? Jump into the comments below and let's have a proper discussion. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more honest movie reviews, Hollywood news, production updates, and box office analysis here on Screen Hollywood. And get the scoop on all of the latest entertainment news at screenhollywood.com. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the things you don't see are far more terrifying than the things you do. See you in the next one.